Today's episode is brought to you by my favorite mind hacking tool. It's a product called Magic Mind, and I'm going to tell you all about it later in this episode. But for now, let's get started.
Project managers, have you ever felt like you should get that promotion or a better job? Start a business, write that book. Have you ever felt you were made for more but didn't know where to start?
Welcome to the PM for the Masses podcast with your host, Caesar Abaid.
Learn from the experts, think outside the box, have a voice, network, and be extraordinary.
PM for the Masses podcast.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome once again. I'm Caesar Abaid, your host, and this show is your regular reminder that your career matters more than your job, and that your life is a project and you are the manager. Whether you work for a company or for yourself, your job stability is really, again, just your ability to land that next gig. So, join me in practicing intentional, planned, and value-adding relevance, starting right now. Again, welcome. Thank you for listening. And today I have on the line Kimberly Wiefling, and I had a hard time titling this episode, and I think the best way to describe my conversation with her is the power of playfulness in leadership. And I'm gonna let Kimberly speak for herself, but first let me introduce her to you. Kimberly Wiefling is a serial entrepreneur, the founder of Wiefling Consulting, and co-founder of Silicon Valley Alliances. She's known for her authentically scrappy style. At Hewlett-Packard, she felt like a hired assassin when she prioritized projects over people. After 10 years working in technology, she realized that technology fails far less frequently than people do. She uses her experience as a scientist and technologist to navigate and transform the messy world of organizational culture. Her superpower is helping companies achieve what seems impossible by converting common sense into common practice and bringing people with diverse backgrounds together to achieve what couldn't be achieved alone. Kimberly has worked with over 100 major corporations, including Yamaha Motors, Century, Mitsubishi, NASA, and Indeed. She has produced 6 books in her Scrappy brand series, including the international bestseller Scrappy Project Management, which continues to sell well 14 years after the original publication, was translated into Japanese and is used as a textbook in project management courses. Kimberly is a highly sought-after speaker and has presented in more than a dozen countries and worked with people from over 50 countries. Her personal mentor is the Lifetime Achievement Award-winning thought leader of organizational development, Dr. Edgar Schein. Her mission is to wipe out the pandemic of soul-sucking, toxic organizations so that people can be fully engaged and contribute the highest and best versions of themselves to their work. And Kimberly is on the line with me today from her home office in California. Well, happy Saturday, Kimberly. How are you?
Well, as best as can be expected, given the data.
That is a great answer. That's a great answer. You know, there was a contest here. I live in Canada, right? So we have CBC Radio, which is our version of BBC and your version of, I guess, NPR. And there was a contest years ago about, you know how they say it's as American as apple pie, right?
Yes.
So they wanted to do, is that something is as Canadian as, fill in the blank. So people submitted their entries for this. And the one that won was, it's as Canadian as possible under the circumstances.
Oh, I love it. I was really thinking it was going to be French toast, but that wouldn't make sense at all, would it?
That's a good one.
My husband is Canadian, so.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, yes. He says he spells Canada Canada.
Right. Yeah. We need to come up with a name for this country. What should we name it? Oh, I think you should have a CA and then an NA and a DA. Yeah, that's how they come up.
That's beautiful. You do it perfectly, Caesar.
Right. I've been here. I'm from Brazil originally, but I've been here long enough that it's.
Obrigado.
De nada. Muito bem.
I love Brazilian music, and we've had Celso Alberti and some wonderful Brazilian musicians at our home. Just so joyful music.
Nice. Yeah, it is. It is That's one thing they do well. Yeah, it's music. And
Do you know Ayrton Moreira?
I do not know Ayrton Moreira. No.
Oh, you've got to look up Ayrton Moreira, and he is a famous Brazilian musician. He's played at our home, and it's like channeling the spirits.
I'm making a note here so I can look him up later. And for the Brazilians listening right now, I hope you forgive me. I've been away for a long time. Okay, so Kimberly, let's talk about some fun things. So first of all, you wrote a book called Scrappy Project Management, and it's right there. So let's talk about that book. This came out in 2010, I believe. So what is the premise there? What's the message?
I was shocked, Caesar, because I became a project manager by accident. And I actually thought that what I was doing was just so common sense. Of course, everybody was doing it. But then I saw the post-project reviews, like the post-mortem that you do at the end of every project, and that the same things would go wrong at the end of every project. In fact, the old Project Connections website, you could download a post-mortem template and you can just check off the things that you did wrong again. And I said, why do we have to do the same things wrong over and over again? Why don't we just talk about 12 predictable and avoidable pitfalls, and let's avoid them next time, people?
That almost makes sense. And it makes a lot of sense. And yeah, and this happens over and over again. It is the, I believe it's sometimes the pressure of the deadline and the budget and quality and things like that folks start getting busy working, and then it becomes a fire that needs to be put out, right? And then when you do that, best practices go out the window, right? Because we need to deliver, we need to do that, and then until the next project, and then it's another fire. And
I think you're right. I think people enjoy being a hero also. There's no fun being a fire prevention officer, but if you're a firefighter, you're going to be adored.
Right. Isn't that funny, right? It's, yeah, the things you do to prevent the fire never come up, right? Because the fires didn't come up. But if you put out the fire, then you're the hero. So I think it's, for those in leadership positions right now, especially if you're a director of something to keep in mind, come up with processes and systems to acknowledge the fire prevention officers and recognize that as just as life-saving as the ones who save the account or the project when it's already
we used
on
to
fire.
say firefighters carry matches.
Right. Cool. So one thing you mentioned on your website is you help project teams get unstuck. So we all know that feeling, right? So when we're trying to get something done with other people, we always have to do it with other people because, we're humans. So what makes these project teams stuck in the first place, in your opinion?
I think the biggest problem that I've observed globally, and I have worked with people from over 50 different countries, the biggest problem is that they have something called learned helplessness. They do not feel responsible for the challenges that they face, and they think someone else is doing it to them. Therefore, they become a helpless victim. Have you seen that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that's the default human reaction, right? I like to say we tend to see ourselves as the victim of our tragedies, but the hero of our victories.
All right. That's beautiful. Say that again. That was so poignant.
Yeah, we are the victims of our tragedies, but the heroes of our victories.
Oh, I've got to write that down. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's and I think as a leader, and we're going to talk about the difference between leadership and management next. But I think one of the aspects of the good leader is to open the eyes of folks. Say, hey, you play a part, and whether things go well, and sometimes when things go wrong, this is why it went wrong. And yes, it can be traced to this one thing that we did.
Right.
Not to point blame, but to avoid this in the next time, so we don't have the same postmortem that we had last time. Right?
Right. I just take an object, any object, preferably a rubber chicken, and I let it fall. And I ask people what caused this to fall, and they always say gravity.
Uh-huh.
And I said, yeah. There's always gravity, but I am a physicist by education, and I cannot change the gravitational constant of the universe. Is there anything else that caused it that maybe I could control? And finally, they say, oh, you released it, Kimberly. That's right. There's always gravity, baby. Hold on. If you want to change something, look at how you contributed to it and ask yourself, how might I contribute to a positive impact here?
Mm-hmm. That's a great one. Yeah. So yes, it is gravity, but gravity is always there. So basically that's a constant, that's a rule. And it's a rule of the sandbox, right? That we're all in.
That's right.
So how do we make that work for us as opposed to fight it or blame things on it, right?
Yes. And I have found that even if you just pretend that it's all my fault, pretend I have absolute responsibility for what's happening here, pretend I have absolute power to change it. Imagine I have 50 years, 50 people, and $50 million. What might I do? And with my team, hallucinate like that, the possibilities, and then go for partial credit with what the reality is.
Right. Yes. I like analogies, and I was thinking about gravity and what fights we have airplanes, and the way we designed airplanes, they wouldn't work unless there was gravity, because it needs air to stick to the ground for planes to fly, right? If there was no gravity,
we need resistance. Absolutely. Right. And we wouldn't be able to fly planes without all of these challenges.
Yep.
In fact, one really smarty pants physicist in the 1890s, Lord Kelvin, who has the Kelvin temperature scale named after him, he said, heavier than air flying machines are impossible. Notice how people like that talk. They don't say they're difficult. They may take hundreds or thousands of years to develop and rely on technology I barely understand. Nope, because he couldn't instantly imagine how to do it. He labels it impossible. And that is the biggest barrier to creativity.
And ironically, how absolute of Kelvin to do that, huh? To say that.
Oh, I get it. Absolute Kelvin. Oh, you're so funny. I love engineering jokes, which means I got to tell you mine. Do you know you cannot spell geek without double E?
I'm a double E.
I know.
All right. Okay, so on that topic, leadership is not the same as management. So let's say, what is management and what's leadership, in your opinion?
Okay. Well, this is pretty simple. I go all over the world doing a keynote, and I ask people, raise your hand if you like to be managed. Nobody raises their hand. From the US to Asia to Bulgaria, nobody raises their hand saying, I want to be managed. And the experts say it like this: leaders set direction. They align people on that direction, and they motivate and inspire them to go in that direction. Managers plan, organize, control, and correct. But I make it even simpler. Lead people, manage cows. Lead people, manage schedules, manage budget, but don't try to manage me. That's a big mistake. And I would say most human beings do not like the feeling of being managed.
Okay, let me take just a quick minute here to talk about the latest biohacking tool, Magic Mind, which is a product that I have learned to love and depend on for my day-to-day productivity. Now, this is a productivity drink. It's not an energy drink, right? And when I first tried it, I didn't really like it. It tastes kind of funny, but it really made me more productive, increased my focus, and it's a great part of my routine now, so I can do all the things that I do, being a husband, a father, a professional, and a podcaster, and to do all the things that I do. So, like I said, it's a productivity drink, not an energy drink. And as far as I know, I think it is the world's first productivity drink. So it helps you be more focused on what you're doing, helps you beat procrastination, helps you be more productive, and get into a working flow state if you know what that means, when you are in that flow, when you can just like work for a extended period of time without distractions. And it's very simple. It's a tiny little bottle. It's like 2 ounces. So you take it, you drink it, and the effects start around 30 minutes after that. And you really get the best effects of it after you use it for more than, let's say, 5 to 10 days. So I like to do it in the morning. So I have my morning coffee, but then once I come down here to my office here at home, right before I get started, I drink it, and and after I read my emails and do that, that's when I start feeling the effects of it. And I say that in quotation marks because I don't really feel the effects. It's just magically you're able to concentrate. Right. So it's, you don't get the jitters like you get when you drink a lot of coffee or like some of these other energy drinks. So, you don't really feel it. All of a sudden you realize, oh, wow, I'm being very productive. So, and that's why I like it. Now it's full of natural ingredients. It tastes like, tea, like herbs. It's hard to describe, and there's a little bit of honey in there to make it taste a bit better. So now I really like it. So I actually look forward to my daily dose of Magic Mind. So Magic Mind, as I said, is a sponsor of this episode, and they're offering a limited 20% discount code. And the way to do that is you go to magicmind.co/PMP, not .com, it's .co. So magicmind.co/PMP, and use the code PMP for 20% off your purchase. Again, magicmind.co/PMP, and use the code PMP for 20% off your purchase. And I'm going to have links to Magic Mind and the discount code in the show notes for today's episode. Thanks, Magic Mind, for supporting the PM for the Masses podcast. Now, back to Kimberly. Do you know that quote from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry about building ships?
Oh, please say it. I vaguely remember it.
So it says, I pulled it up here so I don't butcher it. If you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men and women to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea.
Oh, beautiful. Right. If we look at the Leadership Challenge by Barry Posner and Jim Kouzes, they start with model the way and inspire a shared vision. Mm-hmm. And that's the first thing I judge my leaders on. Are they being a great example? And then are they inspiring a shared vision where all of us can align on that fabulous future? And if I am in the right crowd, I put an extra F word in front of that fabulous future.
and Kimberly, here's the thing that this topic comes up here on this podcast often. And it's that folks who are, especially in this field of project management and technology, oftentimes connected to project management, is that we go into these fields because we are the double E's in geek, right? We like math, and we like Kelvin, and we like absolutes. And then we do well, and we become managers. And now we have to inspire and deal with people, which is what we didn't want to do in the first place. That's why we went to engineering school. So how do we develop that skill set of inspiring people to yearn for the endless sea, as opposed to, hey, here's how you build a ship, here's the hammer and the nails?
Oh, I was the worst. I started off with no people skills at all. And I even remember in my only communications class in my 7 years of college, I asked the teacher, how can I keep people from talking to me? I didn't want people to talk to me. But I gradually came to understand I did not have to choose between results or relationships. In fact, I wish somebody had sat me down when I was young and arrogant and told me, Kimberly, I know you really, really want to get the results. And did you know that you could get even better results if you build strong relationships with your people, your team? I would have been so motivated, but I didn't know that. I was just busy getting the tasks done, and nothing in my original project management training taught me anything about leadership.
So how do we, let's say somebody's listening right now and they have a team and they're struggling with relationship building, what is something they can, as soon as this episode is done, they can go back to work and they can do? What is the first thing?
Well, if they like drawing graphs, I recommend getting a piece of graph paper and drawing a graph of your life happiness versus time, starting at birth, and tell your whole life story in a graph of happiness versus time. And then share that with your team members. And then ask every single one of your team members to share their life journey lines. Now, this is an exercise right out of Patrick Lencioni's The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team from very long ago. But this is the number one way to start to build trusting relationships with your people, is to get to know each other as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is not touchy-feely. That is practical, because the number one cause of failure in global teams, if you look at the data on this, is they failed to build trust.
Right. I agree with this 100%. And I really like the way you put it. And even if you want to inspire people, right, knowing what makes them tick, it really helps, right? So I had somebody on my team who was really into cars and racing, and thought himself a great driver. And he was telling me that he was hiring a driving coach to help him do better. And I remember that because later on we had to talk about feedback and areas of opportunity for improvement for that individual. And I was able to say, like, listen, we're not telling you these things because you are bad at your job. It's because you are good, just like you're a good driver, and you still need a coach to help you, make the best of this track. We are trying to improve make everybody level up here, including you. So yeah, here's some areas of improvement, but it does not mean that you're not good at your job. But so it was, I remember this because it was such a great correlation there. But do you think that's a good example of, like, because I took the time to get to know this person, I was able to provide a narrative and a context for that person that they understood?
Absolutely. We have to connect with people at a level where we can understand what motivates them. If you want somebody to be very committed to achieving the project together, show them how it can help them achieve their individual goals. And then you directly spoke to this person's experience of, hey, even the best drivers can get a coach and become a better driver. And what famous athlete doesn't have a coach? So that was a beautiful way to appeal to that person's own incentive system. Congrats on that.
Oh, okay. Thanks. But so one thing that you talk about as well is chaos and clarity, and how to move from chaos to clarity. And I think chaos is present in every organization, regardless of how polished they looked on the outside, like, let's say, Apple or some governments. We know that it's not the case. There's chaos. There's too much information. The more people you have on a team, the more communication paths you have, it grows exponentially. So how do we get out of chaos and move into more clarity, so we can find ways to be inspired and actually get the things done that we need to get done?
Well, first of all, it's really important that you create the illusion of clarity, because yes, there is so much chaos and complexity in our lives, in our work, in our organizations, and people cannot move in that kind of environment. Imagine you're driving, it's a dark night, there's no moon, there's no stars, and it's really foggy, and your headlights are really dim. How fast would you drive?
Yeah, not very fast. Right?
Not very fast. Now imagine it's a bright, clear day. You can see for kilometers and you can drive as fast as you want. You might even exceed the speed limit, right?
God forbid.
Yeah, maybe so. But that is what we need to do, is we need to create this illusion of clarity, at least for the near term, like a train going down the track. So our people can be racing towards that North Star with great clarity, and then rest assured that by the time they get to the next milestone, new clarity will have been created for the next jaunt.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I always try to do anyhow, because I don't want people to come in and say, what should I do? By the way, if you look at the Gallup 12 engagement survey, the first two questions are, do I know what's expected of me at work? And do I have the tools and equipment to do my job? Only 40% of people in the US say yes to that. And I'm not sure about the whole rest of the world.
Wow. That's a great take. I really, I always thought about that in a different way, but I really like that the horizon, right? Between here and the horizon, you know what's there and you can run freely, right? And maybe as a leader, it's your job to frame that. Okay, here are the boundaries. Here's the horizon. Here are the tools. Go at it.
And understand that we will have to pivot and we will learn as we go. I think that's important for people to understand. We're going to have to take some risks. We're going to learn from our mistakes. We're going to experiment. We're going to pivot. That's the whole agile and scrum methodology, right? And we're going to fail forward step by step, lurching fitfully in the direction that we want to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think especially in tech, if you are in this industry when things change so quickly, you may find yourself leading a team that has done a certain type of work, and they are, we're automating what they do, and we need to rethink what this team is doing, and that can be very, it can cause anxiety on everybody. Okay, is my job safe? So, by breaking it down, okay, well, this is a direction we want to go now, right? But that's too fuzzy and too undecided, undefined, but we can talk about it in weeks or months or quarters. Okay, between now and next quarter, this is what we're going to work on. And then when we get there, we reassess, right?
Yeah. And let me just tell you one thing I think people get wrong, and it's very simple to correct, is the measures of success. In the past, the whole default was on time, on budget, feature complete. Well, that is so not helpful when you want to align people on a shared vision of the future, a shared goal. And so what I prefer is, think about this. Imagine a tree. Now you tell everybody, draw the tree, and you all draw your tree, and somebody drew a palm tree, somebody drew a shrub, somebody drew a giant oak, someone else an evergreen, because the measures weren't clear. But if I say, draw a Christmas tree, a pine tree, it's 3 meters tall, it has a 0.5 meter wide trunk at the base, it has 72 branches from the bottom up, and it has 4,327 needles that are all 3 centimeters long, and they're dark, dark green. Now they're all going to draw the same tree. Now, none of those measures of success were anything I ever planned to measure, but because I expressed it with that kind of clarity, then the success finish line is more clear. The measures of success are not just a scorecard that you got to check off at the end of a project. The measures of success help everybody close their eyes and imagine that same direction, that same North Star, so they can see it, hear it, feel it, taste it, and smell it. And that is what we're missing with a lot of our scorecards.
Mm-hmm. So how do we as leaders develop that ability to define that clear North Star because we don't want to tell people how to do things, right? We don't want to get that granular. So we want to define some sort of outcome, but oftentimes we are not sure ourselves what the outcome is because we don't know. But how do we develop that skill of becoming better at that, creating clarity for the short and medium term for the team?
Well, first of all, I want to tell you congratulations on not trying to figure out how to do it for your team. It's like going into a fine restaurant, ordering from the menu and running back into the kitchen and telling the chef how to cook your food. Right. You're going to end up with a big knife in your head.
Right.
But the way that we create the future is to make it safe for people to imagine a possibility without needing to prove that it's practical, realistic, or achievable. And that means using de Bono's lateral thinking to jump to that future without any evidence it's possible, without knowing how, and create a clear, vivid image of that. And then ask the question, what might make that possible, even though it seems impossible today? And I've got a few techniques to help with that.
Okay. Can we talk about some of those?
Yes.
Okay.
First of all, you have to make it safe because, of course, we're talking about really super smart people. I studied 7 years of physics. You studied engineering, many technical people that pride themselves on being practical and realistic and effective. First, you have to tell them, thank you. We will use those skills later. In the early phases, we would like to have a divergent conversation for possibilities. So you got to get their brains in the right mood. So one of the first things I do is stand up wherever you are right now and start pointing at things and call it something different. Like, go ahead, just try it. I'm going to point at this and say it's pots and pan. This is a piece of fruit. This is a pencil. You point at different things and call them something they're not. So just try it and see how you like it.
All right. So I'm holding, for those listening right now, I can't see. I'm holding a water bottle. I'm going to call it a shoe.
Great.
And here's a pen, but I'm calling it a car.
Okay.
So I have a shoe and a car on my desk.
Right. Now, how was that? How did your brain react to that?
Didn't like it very much. It was like that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That part of your brain, that's the part of your brain we want to shut down and say, thank you. You're very practical. We will use you later. But right now, we want that playful part of your brain that can imagine. Now, the bad news is NASA did a creativity test on people when they were 5 years old, 10 years old, 15 years old, and when they were adults. Now, guess which one had 98% creativity and which one had 2%?
The youngest.
That's right. So 98% creativity when you're 5. 10-year-olds had 30%. Wow. What happens between 5 and 10 years old in most civilizations?
School.
That's right. You go to school and you learn there's a right answer. So you have to get back to that childhood brain that is allowed to imagine and super connect and not worry about the practical aspects of the project plan, the PERT chart, the Gantt chart, the how. And I like to do that using a technique called collage. So you get people to get on a shared whiteboard or a flip chart together, and you put images on there that shows what the world will be like when the project is finished and wildly successful. And then you get everybody to really stand in awe of that shared creation. Then you create news reports from the future, get into groups and say, all right, what are the headlines? What are people saying? Be interviewing them on the street. And then you get them to actually do the news from the future reports as if they're broadcasting globally on BBC. And they're interviewing people on the streets, and they're broadcasting from Mars, and they're talking from the space station. And you get them to imagine like this, what the world will be like in the future. Again, without any evidence it's possible, without knowing how. And then the secret of lateral thinking is working backwards from there. What would happen just before that, and before that, and before that, until you finally connect to today's reality. And now you can do next steps. What do I do today, next week, next month, next quarter, in order to lurch toward that possibility, which could change over time, as we've discussed, because it is an iterative process. What do you think about that?
That is amazing. That is a great, great insight. In fact, I'm going to use that immediately. It's the weekend now, but next week I'm going to use that. I remember a book I read when I think I was like 10 or 11. And these kids were trying to figure out where it was like two gangs, I think it was in Eastern Europe, the book, whatever. And they were trying to figure out where one of the kids from the opposing group lived. And they decided to follow the kid backwards back to their house. And it's like, what? So the approach was okay, we know that he comes to school every day. And so we're just going to watch to see which corner he comes out of when he comes to school. Oh, he comes from that corner over there. So tomorrow we're going to wait for him over there and see where he comes, from that perspective. And they figure out how he lived by following him backwards. And this is what reminded me of. It's basically we're trying to get to that goal, but backwards.
Absolutely. And I call it thinking from the future, because I used to call it backwards thinking, but it didn't sound that great.
That's great. I really like that.
And it's so funny whenever I've got these huge companies with all these managers, directors, or executives down there on the floor making collages or on a concept board or mural making collages, they get into this flow state. They really get into a different state of mind when they are processing things visually. And then when they're allowed to imagine and hallucinate these news reports from the future, they get pretty exciting. In fact, one group I'm working with now has gone and made a video photoshopping themselves into videos in front of famous places in the United Nations, talking to world leaders to make it so believable. And they're going to show that to their executives in their presentations next week.
Amazing. Amazing. That's great. And it kind of answers the next question I had was to how to increase creativity, right? Because this is one of the things you talk about, increasing by 300%.
Yes.
Is that one of the techniques? I'm assuming it is.
Well, yes, it is. One of the techniques is to use different parts of your brain, the visual aspects of your brain, the logical left brain, a calculating, rational part of your brain is wonderful for various phases of projects. The more visual part of our brain doesn't get a chance to say that much. And so using pictures and images can be very helpful. Also, storytelling, creating stories, very helpful. Sometimes, this is a little weird, but you write a question with your dominant hand, put the pen in your non-dominant hand, and write the answer. And you have to write so slowly because most people are so bad at it that other part of your brain starts to get a few words in that can contribute to the conversation. You just got to slow that down. What is it called? Thinking slow.
Mm-hmm. So by using the different half of your brain, you get a different answer, basically.
Yes, and it can only happen if it's safe for people to be what we call playful. And quite honestly, that is not welcome in every situation or by every so-called leader.
Right. Yes. I'm assuming. I probably a good environment for that would be like a team retreat, like a workshop where people already are ready to okay, I'm here for this few days and I expect something weird and different. Right?
Yes, and you have to really prepare them for it by saying, hey, look, I don't like having fun, but the research proves we have to in order to increase creativity. Because I have been at these retreats with a big company, I won't say the name, but like a really high level R&D executive, for example. And in the middle of the retreat, he stands up, why I need to do this? I am R&D man. And I'm like, oh, for crying out loud, right? So sometimes some people, they just cannot accept it because it's not logical, it's not rational, it's not step by step. And those people will never accept it. But my approach is this. I want at least 1 or 2 people out of every 20 to absolutely hate what I'm doing. Because if everybody likes it, it's like Budweiser beer. I mean, you can drink it, but why bother?
That's awesome. Yes, I can imagine the pushback you might get sometimes.
Can you? I bet you've gotten some pushback, huh?
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't, right? If you're trying to do something, if you're trying to make a difference, you're going to get pushback. If you don't get pushback, you're not doing something right.
That's right. And I eventually got that guy 6 months later when he saw me the second time and he realized how valuable the experience was. He came and said, I must apologize to you in front of everybody. And I've had that happen repeatedly where someone's in my workshop and then a year later, they'll come back and say, yeah, I really hated your workshop. It was really, really uncomfortable, but it was really good. And when I realized how valuable it was, I started using it in my team. So sometimes it takes people a while. It's an acquired taste. And then they go and do some experiments and then they get better results. And when you get better results, why not use it?
Indeed. That's awesome. So let's say people are listening right now and like myself, they're feeling energized and they're feeling hopeful for the future. Say, oh, there's a path here. What is a bit of advice for them that they can, like something actionable they can do today?
Well, one of the things you can do today is get yourself a thinking partner. So You can't see the back of your own head. You need somebody that will listen to you generously. And when you say, I have this crazy dream, blah, 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 it seems impossible, but if it were possible, it would transform me, my life, my team, my work, my organization for the better. And instead of looking at you and saying, yes, but you're crazy, forget it, they look at you and say 4 magic words. Interesting. Tell me more. And they just listen to you as if what you're saying is genius. And it's of course possible. And when you start to say it's impossible, they say, just a second, what might make that possible? If you had a magic wand, what would you create that would move you towards that? And they ask you questions that open your mind and keep you in that conversation. And then, of course, you do the same for them. And at the end of every session, like once a week, you say, okay, what are you going to do this week? Make a promise. And then the next week, you follow up and you check in on each other. Did you do it? What happened? Now, what's your next big crazy dream for the future? And you keep doing that for a year. And I did it myself for a year. And that totally transformed what was possible for my life. Thanks to a friend called Sherry Ream, who met with me every single Sunday for a whole year. I went from wishing to living it.
That's awesome. I had a similar experience with, I'm not in one right now, but I've been in a couple of mastermind groups, which was a group of people doing that for each other. We met weekly, and then at another point we met every other week. This podcast is a result of that.
Oh, tell me about that.
Yeah. So I started a podcast for, I used to work with my dad's company, small business. And you know, it was just 3 people. So I had to do everything. And one of the things I had to do was marketing. And I like to listen to podcasts, and maybe I should do a podcast. So I did that for a little bit, for a while. And it was a marketing part. It wasn't like my personal passion, right? It was a construction industry. I was not a construction person, but we provided a service to that industry, and it worked. And I got the taste for doing this. And then, as part of that, I got into a mastermind with other podcasters, and they challenged me on that because, you know, it was a lot of work, and maybe I should redirect that to a work of passion instead, right? And I said, well, I really like project management. It really changed my life. You know, I can get things done now. So that's how the idea got in. But if I didn't have that group, I would have thought, how can I possibly do 2 podcasts? This one is already hard enough. And there's, you know, and just because it's something neat, but they help me see what could become, right?
Right. Again, you can't see the back of your own head. You need somebody else to hold up that mirror for you, and also to reflect back to you how magnificent you are and the potential that they see in you. Like, we tend to compare our insides to everybody else's outsides. So we always come up short. But other people, they have insecurities too. They have concerns and fears. And when we start to see how other people view us, the possibilities they see that we're capable of, we can rise to that.
Amazing. So yeah, so if you're listening right now, you know, show this episode to that person you're thinking of right now that could be a partner. You know, it could be somebody from work, or a family member, or a friend, or your spouse, who knows, and see if you can get into an agreement and get on the same page. It can really, really make a difference. That's how I did the podcast. That's how I wrote my book as well. It was without that support, I would not have done any of those things.
And, you know, you don't have to commit to a whole year. Just say, let's try it once. Mm-hmm. And then let's experiment for a month. And let's go on for another month. And you can do it bit by bit like that. You don't have to eat the sandwich with one big bite. You can take a little nibble here, and then you can make progress bit by bit.
Amazing. Kimberly, this has been delightful. Thank you so much. So if people want to learn more about you and what you do, where should they go?
Call the police. They'll know where I am.
Just follow those sirens.
Follow the sirens, right? I have a website, Wiefling.com. Nobody can spell it. WIEF as in fun, LING.com. Or KimberlyWiefling.com to see the precise work that I do with teams. And I think I'm the only Kimberly Wiefling on the what I call the worldwide waste of time, the internet. So just reach out to me, send me an email, make a phone call, text me, WhatsApp, Line, WeChat, whatever you've got, I've got it too, because I've been all over the world working with people on these things.
Right. You even have your book translated to Japanese, which is amazing.
I can't read it, but I'm told that the jokes are funnier in English.
I'm sure. I'm sure. So, okay. So I'll have links to these, the show notes for today's episode at pmforthemasses.com. So check out Wiefling.com, KimberlyWiefling.com, and also Scrappy Project Management. Kimberly, again, what a pleasure. Thank you so much.
It's been an honor. Thank you for your precious time.
Thank you for listening to the PM for the Masses podcast.
Tune in next week for more great ideas on how to manage your projects better and truly stand out in your industry.
PMforthemasses.com